Hi, everybody, and welcome to Inside Study Abroad. My name is Brooke Roberts, and today I'm here talking to Samantha Cooper. Hi, Sam. So,
Hi.
Samantha's pretty much a rock star. Love her dearly for many, many reasons. One of them is she used to be my boss. We worked at USA together. She was the mastermind behind USA's growth the first 5 years or so. And but beyond that, she's done everything. She's sort of a woman of many skills and experiences. So she's worked at University of London. She's been a study abroad advisor for the EAP program in California. She was leading students around the world with Babson's BRIC program. And she's actually even more interesting than just her resume. She backpacked around the world for like 2 years, I think. And then you're also a marathon runner, which is ridiculous. And one of my best friends.
Recovering marathon.
Recovering marathon addict, yes. So, and one of my best friends. So it's really great to have you. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited. This is fun.
So you look great, by the way. Doesn't she look great?
Thanks, darling.
So I always start off every interview with the same question. So tell me your study abroad story.
I feel like I have study abroad story that everyone has, but in that I went to. Okay. So I like to think of my parents as the beginning of my study abroad story. They actually met while they were traveling, so they weren't studying, but they were traveling abroad in Israel and ran out of money and found themselves both on a kibbutz. So I feel like I was born into wanting to explore the world. And my dad took my brother and I to Paris when we were both 13 years old. That was our 13th birthday tradition. And my dad for the trip was prepping me with French, which he really doesn't speak actually, and was teaching me how to say where's the bathroom, and then how to say to any cab drivers, can you please take us to the hotel because my dad's drunk, things like that.
Oh my God, I love Mr. Cooper.
I love my dad too. So I kind of I showed up in 13, super awkward, really unfortunate clothes. The pictures are bad. But I loved it and didn't understand what was going on, and we were only there for a few days, and so that was sort of the beginning of French for me. So I went to UC Santa Barbara and started studying French, and I actually went to the University of California because they have an amazing education abroad program, which I then worked for. And I studied abroad for a year, and really was prepared to love it and be amazed and become this French woman. And I didn't.
And it was in France, right? Where in France?
It was so I studied abroad for a year in Grenoble, France at the University of Grenoble. And it was really, really hard. I think I probably experienced a lot of the struggles that I now talk to students about. It was hard to learn the language. It's embarrassing. It's hard to make friends. It's hard to navigate the culture. And so I actually, when at the end of my time there, my campus study abroad office sent out an email about becoming a peer advisor. So I realized that it was really important that I go back and tell the world about my experience because it was actually really hard. And so I wanted to share sort of the challenge and triumph of doing a year abroad. So I had no idea I was going to even get into the field, but I graduated and immediately started working in study abroad and have never looked back, really.
Well, okay, I know their stories, so we're just going to share it with everybody else. I think your story, so you went to your, USA was your next job, right?
Yeah, well, I graduated from college and moved to London. My dad, I'm a dual citizen.
Yes.
Yeah, so my dad's British and I'm a dual citizen. Thank you very much, Daddy Cooper. And I was kind of determined. I love youth because you're just not afraid. But I was very determined to just move to London and get a job. And so I showed up there 10 days after 9/11, and just started applying to universities. Didn't have a computer. Just looking at there was some stuff online, but just looking through newspapers. And luckily I got a job at Chelsea College of Art and Design working with international students.
That's awesome.
And I really loved it. And it was a short stint there, and then I actually ended up going back to the University of California and working in their campus-wide office.
Okay. All right, well, the story I want to hear, though, because I think it's hilarious. Well, If I remember it correctly, dang. So when you started with USA, so and USA was just sort of like growing. Tony, had been around forever, but Tony
Yep.
Johnson, everybody knows Tony Johnson. But doing stuff. But they had formalized USA just like recently within that. And so tell me about how that happened, because I just think it just like going to London. I think is what I understand about the story with USA. It took a lot of guts to just be like, I'm going for it. It's a lot of risk. And I think a lot of people now, like students I talk, or not students, but people who want to get into the field now, they're...
Oh, I lost you.
Oh, hello? Am I there?
Hey, okay, you're there.
Sorry, glitch. But I think a lot of people are trying to get in the field now don't realize how many of us had to take a big risk. That first job or something. And so, I don't know, tell us about that.
Yeah, I basically applied for, USA had an opening in their London office, and I had been in California and trying to get back to London, because I regretted leaving, so word to the wise. And I didn't get the job, and Tony, who, turned into my, later was my boss and a really good friend of mine, he kind of said, you're really great, but this is not the job for you, but we'd like to offer you something in Boston. Mm-hmm. So there wasn't really a job in mind. We talked about maybe what it kind of looked like, and a month later I had moved my whole life from California to Boston and just showed up.
And started an office.
I was lucky and feel really privileged to have started working with Catherine Hanley, who's an amazing rock star in study abroad, and I've learned a lot from her. But yeah, there was nothing in place. There was not an Excel sheet to be found. We were working with offices, obviously, in Europe and all over, and I just kind of jumped in. And I think you do have to take that risk. The Wednesday, the first week of my job there, Tony and Aiden were on their way to visit Wake Forest University, and I got a call at 9 a.m. and said, hey, can you be at the airport in an hour, because we'd like you to come to North Carolina. So it was one of those, like, okay, an hour later, and I was on a plane, and I do think you have to take those risks.
Yeah.
And, kind of further to that question of advice for how to get into the field, I get a little bit frustrated with this debate between students that are trying to get master's degrees and getting into campus positions or university positions and the opportunities with program providers. But I really do think there is an opportunity to carve out what it is you're interested in doing. Mm-hmm. Even just looking at you and your website and all the cool things that you do. I do think you have to take that risk.
Mm-hmm. I agree. All right, so this is one of my favorite questions. I've never asked it before, but I think this could rouse a little interesting discussion. I know you pretty well. We're friends. I mean, it's everybody. Just full disclosure, we're actually friends. And I think one word I would use to describe you. It's not the only word, obviously, but one word would be feisty. And I think some might even say I'm slightly feisty sometimes. And feisty can be taken a lot of different ways. Very negative connotation sometimes, very positive in a lot of ways. And so how do you think feisty women are received in international ed?
Such a good question.
Well, thank you.
There's a lot of us out there, I think, or maybe we just all know each other.
Yeah, all 10 of us. No, just kidding.
But I do think, I aspire to be a feisty rock star in study abroad, and so I'm flattered that you would even call me that. But I don't know. I think it's mixed. I think it depends on the people that you meet and the environment that you're in. I think I'm hopeful that with this new crop of international educators coming up and all the new opportunities in study abroad and social media and stuff, that there's a lot more room for the drivers, I guess, of international ed. I wouldn't say it's received poorly, but, I feel like the feisty women can get pushed into bossy or overbearing.
And I don't think that's a unique thing to our field in terms of like women with those characteristics.
Exactly.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the challenges is that you know, study abroad started off as sort of like somebody was just told, go take care of that because you've been to another country. And it was a very fluid. I'm reading all about the history of education abroad right now, so I'm really into this right now because I'm a nerd. But, it was very much more fluid. Obviously, there weren't as many best practices, the good and bad of it all, and there weren't as many regulations surrounding it, and so it was much more. You could be much more creative about it. You could say you want to do a Middle Eastern tour, let's make it happen. Whereas now it'd be like, whoa, what's happening,
Yeah.
And so I just feel like because study abroad now is becoming much more regimented. It's harder, I think, in some areas, whether it's a study abroad office or even some providers, I think, or even large organizations, they're so used to the lockstep nature of things. If somebody's like, maybe let's detour a little, let's try something different, it's not, and that might not even be a feisty woman thing, that might just be a creative person thing. And so I don't know, that's what I often find frustrating. That's what I love about working at Go Abroad, is because every day is like a new thing, and I'm like, well, I don't know, let's try it. And so, but yeah, so I don't know, that would be my take. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think you're right, and I think that because we've spent the greater part of the last 10 years in study abroad, putting together processes and best practices and standards. I do think there is sort of a stress on process and how things should work, and I'm definitely a process girl. I love it. I love myself a binder. I love some visual processing. But I think that's the real opportunity for us feisty women in study abroad, because I think I'm really excited. I think it's time for us to move beyond that, having learned, those best practices, and really get into strengthening study abroad programs and really looking at the academic content and bringing it back to the student. And I think it's got to be feisty women that do it. So I actually see a lot of opportunity in where we are right now.
Yeah, I do too. I think it's a really interesting time, because it's, just like with everything else in healthcare and every other industry, is that, this whole generation is retiring or moving on. And so, but, it's sad, and it's good and bad, because it gives, a new generation of people opportunity to lead. But then it's also, there's a historical nature of things. And, I can't imagine in 10 years going to a big conference where, like, the people who were there who, conceptualized the forum, for instance, aren't there anymore. It's like, but then that puts a lot of ownership and responsibility on us to sort of carry that legacy forward and make it still a vibrant community that is valuable, to all of us. Okay, so, I mean, we're going to go over time because, why not? I run this show. So one of the things I think would be cool for people to hear about, because, people all the time want to know, how did you get in the field? And then if you ever tell anyone, I quit my job and traveled around the world for a couple of years, no biggie. I bet they're like, oh my God, that's so amazing. I want to be just like you. So tell us, like, what drove you to do that, and then tell us a little bit about, like, some pointers if somebody's thinking about doing it, some things to think about before they make the jump, that you maybe didn't know or didn't think about.
Yeah, it was something that I always wanted to do, and I think that's after having studied abroad and having family in Europe, and knowing that there's a lot of countries out there where students are expected to do a gap year and travel. So I kind of thought it was just something that you did. And I just got to the point where I knew I was going to do it. I kind of thought about it in the same terms as grad school. In fact, I often say I have a master's in international travel, because it is a lot of work. And I kind of just decided to do it, and it is absolutely the best thing I've ever done. Again, kind of like study abroad, it was really challenging, and even having advised students and knowing what I was getting myself into, one of the things I really learned was, culture shock. It happens even when you know it and breathe it and tell students about it. You still revert to your sort of coping mechanisms in other countries. But my biggest advice to people is, one, do And I think a big thing, people that aren't in study abroad, or people that don't really see travel as part of their life, it's actually really affordable to do, less expensive than you think it is. So my big advice is, if you're going to be buying a big screen TV, don't, and put that money aside, and you could live in Nepal for about a month based on that money that you're not using. So there are ways to budget for it.
And there are like thousands of bloggers out there who like have blog posts about 10 tricks for cheap round the world trips, you know, things like that. Yeah, so
I totally missed the boat on that. I have all these resources and advice, and everyone else did it. So now I just link people. Hey, this is really good. But I think my biggest advice for students and professionals, and I do think professionals should take a gap year, an adult gap year, is to prioritize. I think it's overwhelming to travel for longer than 4 months. It's really, really overwhelming because you do get fatigued, and it's, especially when you're by yourself, it's a lot of hard work to find, even days when you just want to find food and you don't want to sit in a restaurant, or you know, you're struggling with finding a hotel for that night. It can.
Or in your own head, going, I'm alone in the middle of Guatemala.
Exactly.
What am I doing with my life?
Don't get me started on Guatemala.
I know.
A country that I love, by the way. But my biggest advice is to prioritize, and this is sound advice from the wonderful Catherine Hanley. Prioritize, and then just keep going back to those priorities. So what I decided before I figured out where I wanted to go, I wanted to volunteer, I wanted to learn Spanish, and I wanted to get a TOEFL certificate and teach English. And those are the things that help me decide where and when I wanted to go.
Very cool.
And other than that, you just have to actually go. The way that I left, I was so bogged down in planning before, and the way that I was able to go is I bought a one-way ticket to Guatemala. Done.
Yeah, nice. And you how long were you saving for it? Just out of curiosity, logistically.
I saved. I'm a good saver, so I'm always saving something. But I saved for about a year, so it wasn't that tough. And I also worked while I was traveling, so that helped extend. And all in all, I was gone for 15 months.
Okay, so
yeah,
cool.
Yeah,
I know. I was following the blog. It was amazing.
I missed the blog.
I know. Okay. You still could blog about it after the fact. Yeah.
I'm reimagining the website blogging this year.
Yeah, okay, good.
Stay tuned.
Okay. Okay, so last question, because we're way over time.
Sorry.
No, it's not your fault. It was a good conversation. If you could go back in time and do college all over again, knowing everything you know now, and you got to choose one study abroad destination, a semester, a year, whatever, where would you go this time around, knowing everything you know?
I can only choose one?
Yep. Just think about most students, you know, other than like short-term programs, they get to do this once.
Yes. You know, I love my experience in France, and it's hard to say if I had done Spanish first, if I'd feel the same way, but I would be a Spanish major, and I would study abroad in South America, probably somewhere like Colombia, because I just became so enchanted with that language and the things that I've learned through culture through that language. It just seemed a little bit more accessible to me. I love French. It's something that is still better than my Spanish. But I do think if I could do it all over again, you know, I probably wouldn't go to Europe. I'd probably do something. Yeah. I don't know if I'd be ready though. I couldn't have traveled the world when I was younger. I'm glad that I did it when I was in my later 20s.
Yeah. I always think about that too. Is like I always ask this question to people, but I'm like, yeah, the version of you now could handle Colombia. The version of you at 20, maybe not, maybe not.
No way. Yeah. I can't even imagine the things that I would get into.
And and that's one of the things that sometimes I always struggle with is I'm always balancing sort of my identity as the wide-eyed, innocent girl from the farm who going to Europe was a huge deal. And then the more educated and world-traveled version of myself, the adult, capable woman who's like, that's, easy. And I'm like, it wasn't easy when I was 18. It was hard. But everybody needs that first experience, to get them to the next layer and the next layer and stuff. So,
exactly.
Yeah. All right, that's it. That's all we have for today, everybody. I know. I wish we could keep talking. But Sam, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks,
again.
Brooke. It was fun.
I'll have all her whatever she lets me link to down in the blog. And you're not on Twitter, right?
I am on Twitter.
You are on Twitter. What's your
But
handle?
I haven't tweeted yet. I'm gearing up for this big unveil.
Oh, okay. Well, hopefully by the time I post this, you have it available, and I'll link to it in the blog, but we'll keep a secret right here.
Maybe you can see it down here. Are you going to do one of those?
Yeah, I could do that, but if you're not public yet, then I don't want to, 30 million people going to your tweet, because that's how many people read my blog, clearly.
Obviously. So. I'm a huge fan, by the way. I love it. It's I read it every day. I share. I like.
That means I should start posting something every day if you're reading every day.
Well, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I appreciate
I follow all of your avenues.
Oh yeah, exactly. All right, cool. Thank you very much, everybody. This is Inside Study Abroad. I'm Brooke Roberts, and I'll talk to you later. Bye.